This is the story of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, three brothers who helped build an ark, survived a world-ending flood, and stepped into silence when the storm was over. But it isn't just a survival story, it's about character. What's revealed when the sky's clear and no one is watching. This is about choices made in moments of calm that shape entire nations. Because sometimes the greatest test comes not during the storm, but after it. And how you respond to weakness in others reveals everything about your own heart. The skeletons of the old city lay under their feet, sun-bleached beams, shattered clay, bits of broken pottery scattered across the stone. Ham bent down and picked up half a painted bowl. "Strange," he said, turning it over in his hand. "This was someone's kitchen once. Maybe someone like Mom." Shem crouched beside him. "Or someone like us." Japheth ran his hand along a stone that had once been a wall. "Hard to believe people lived here." "They danced here," Ham said, pointing to the mosaic fragments beneath the dirt. "They had parties, laughed, built things, and ignored everything Dad said," Shem added quietly. The silence landed heavy after that. This ridge overlooked what used to be a village, now nothing more than rubble and half-buried memories. The flood had washed it clean. Not just the buildings, but the people, their cities, their idols, their towers, and noise, gone, all of it. Except for the memories that still clung to the hills. Ham stood up and shielded his eyes against the sun. "You think we'll ever build something like this again?" Shem didn't answer right away. Then, "Only if we build it better." They turned back toward the new camp. Their father, Noah, had chosen the site carefully, a patch of high ground where three streams met, not far from where the ark had rested. There, a new vineyard was being planted. Animal pens had been fenced. A cooking fire crackled near a pile of hand-hewn tools. It wasn't much, but it was the beginning. "Dad's out there again," Japheth said as they walked, "by the vines." Ham groaned. "He's been whispering to those grape leaves like they're his grandkids." Shem chuckled. "He says the soil listens." "Great," Ham said. "So now the dirt's more obedient than I am." They entered the camp just as Noah stood up from the vines, brushing dirt from his knees. His hands trembled slightly as he steadied a clay jar in the shade. "You boys walk far?" he asked. "Just over the ridge," Shem said. "The old city." Noah's eyes clouded for a moment. "I used to preach on those steps," he murmured. Then he turned and walked back to his tent, slow and quiet. That night, while the others were asleep, Noah stayed in the vineyard, alone. A jug of fermented drink in his hands. The stars wheeled silently above him, and the new world stretched in every direction, wide, quiet, and raw with promise. But even in a new world, a test was coming, and how each son responded to it would echo through every generation that followed. The sun hadn't yet crested the far hills when Ham rose from his sleeping mat. Birdsong trickled through the brush, and the fire from the night before still glowed in faint orange patches. The scent of roasted meat lingered in the air, but the camp itself was still. Shem snored softly under his blanket. Japheth had one foot sticking out of his tent, twitching. Ham stretched, yawned, then wandered toward the vineyard. He wasn't planning anything big, just needed air and maybe a fig or two. The vines sparkled with dew and the clay jars near the shade tree sat undisturbed. At first, then Ham heard it, a low humming sound. Not from an animal, a voice. He stepped through the vines quietly. And there, curled beneath the large linen canopy, was Noah, sprawled on the ground, barely conscious, his robe tossed aside, his face red with wine, and his song now just a mumble. Ham froze. His heart raced, not with fear, but confusion. This was the man who'd built the ark, who'd stood in a world full of sin and called people to repent, the man who'd warned kings, outlasted storms, walked with God. And now, he looked broken, slumped in the dirt, a great tree fallen. For a long moment, Ham just stood there. Then his lips twitched. A smirk, small, uncertain, but it grew. He turned around and ran. Back at camp, Shem was tending the fire, stirring coals with a stick. Japheth sat nearby, still groggy, brushing dirt from his face. Ham stormed in like he had news worth gold. "You will not believe what I just saw," he said, loud and fast. Shem looked up. "What?" "Dad," Ham said, barely able to keep from laughing. "He's in the vineyard, drunk, passed out, naked." Japheth sat straighter. "What?" "Yup. Robe on the ground, lying there like a sack of barley, mumbling to himself." Shem's face darkened. "Ham. I mean, come on! The great Noah, God's chosen man, rolling in the dirt. It's not funny." Ham shrugged. "It kind of is." But Japheth had already risen to his feet, and Shem, his jaw tight, eyes firm, stood beside him. Without a word, they grabbed a heavy cloak from the tent. One on each side, they walked together, backward into the vineyard. Not looking, not staring, just moving slowly, arms outstretched until they reached their father and gently covered him. They said nothing. No jokes, no judgment, just respect. Because Shem and Japheth understood something Ham didn't yet see, even the righteous fall. But it's what you do when they fall that shows who you are. Noah woke with the sun in his eyes and dirt on his cheek. His mouth was dry. His head ached. And for a moment he didn't remember where he was or how he got there. Then the smell of crushed grapes reached his nose. The vines, the clay jars. The taste of the wine returned like a flash of heat in his chest. He sat up slowly, blinking against the light, his robe gone. But something was draped over him, a thick, woven cloak, familiar, not his own. Someone had covered him. He stood, leaning against a vine pole for balance. The ground tilted a little beneath his feet, but his mind sharpened fast. Not because of the wine, but because he knew his sons. By the time he returned to the camp, Shem and Japheth were near the stream, washing their hands and speaking in quiet tones. Ham sat by the fire, carving a design into a stick and whistling. He didn't notice his father's eyes on him. Noah called for them. One by one, they came. They stood in a line, just like when they were boys. And Noah, his hair gray, his hands trembling, looked at each one. Not like a man seeing with his eyes, like a father seeing with his spirit. "You saw me," he said. No one spoke. "You saw my weakness." Ham looked up quickly, eyes darting. Shem lowered his head. Japheth's hands were folded. "I was vulnerable," Noah said. "Exposed." He turned to Ham first. "You mocked me. You left me uncovered. You told others instead of protecting me." Ham's jaw clenched. "It was a joke. It was a moment that revealed your heart." Noah's voice didn't rise, but it carried weight. "The line of Canaan will carry that shadow," he said, "not because of the joke, but because of the joy you took in dishonor." Ham looked away, and the camp went quiet. Then Noah turned to Shem. "You didn't just turn away, you walked backward. You covered me without stealing my dignity." He placed a hand on Shem's shoulder. "Your descendants will walk with the Lord, and one day, through your line, the world will be blessed." To Japheth he said, "You walked with your brother. You respected the one who gave you life." He smiled faintly. "May your descendants spread wide. May you dwell in peace beside your brother's tents." The words hung in the air like morning mist. Not angry, not vengeful, just true. Because Noah wasn't just speaking as a father, he was speaking as a prophet, and what had begun as a private moment had now become a future. The brothers walked away in silence. Shem, steady. Japheth, thoughtful. Ham, bitter. Because sometimes the hardest consequence isn't punishment. It's knowing you chose wrong when no one forced you to. The camp began to change after that day, not suddenly, but steadily, like vines growing toward different suns. Ham was the first to move his tent, farther from the stream, closer to the southern hills. He said it was for space, said it was for the soil, but Shem and Japheth knew better. "I just need my own land," Ham said, tossing rope into a pack. Shem crossed his arms. "No one's stopping you." Ham shrugged. "Good. Then you won't miss me." Japheth stepped forward. "You don't have to go angry." Ham shot him a look. "I'm not angry. I'm free." Shem watched him go, dust curling behind the wagon like smoke. "He's not going to build with us," Japheth said quietly. Shem didn't answer at first. Then he murmured, "No, he'll build something else." Ham's tents grew fast. He married quickly, planted bold crops, and raised strong sons, Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. He built cities with wide gates and towers that scraped the sky, but always beneath, in quiet corners, were whispers of pride, of taking shortcuts, of chasing greatness without wisdom, and though the land bore fruit, something in it always felt tense, like a bowstring pulled too tight. Shem stayed close to Noah. He moved north, toward the mountain ridges, where the trees grew thick and the soil was slow to give. He built slower, tilled longer. But he taught his sons to walk upright. Elam, Ashur, Arphaxad. He read the old scrolls by firelight, told stories of Eden, of Enoch, of God. "This is the line," he would say, tracing names into the dirt. "The line that remembers." And Japheth? He went west, built near the waters. His sons spread wide, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, across coastlands and forests. He loved music, carved boats, traded goods. And whenever he returned to visit, he always brought something strange and beautiful, painted shells, polished stones, new seeds. But he never forgot what Shem had done in the vineyard. He told the story to his children, told it not to shame Ham, but to show what honor looks like in silence. Years passed. Tents turned to homes. Fields turned to nations. And from a single act of respect or dishonor, the world began to form, not just in land and blood, but in character. It started with a celebration, not a war, not a warning, just an invitation sealed in wax and sent by runner. To my brothers, Shem and Japheth, come feast in the valley of Canaan. Bring your sons, bring your stories. Let us be a family again. Ham. Shem read the scroll aloud, his brow furrowed. After all these years? Japheth asked. Why now? Shem shrugged. Maybe he's finally ready. Or maybe, Japheth muttered, he's setting a trap. But still, they went, because blood was blood. And sometimes hope is stronger than suspicion. The valley of Canaan shimmered with tents the size of palaces, colored banners, trumpets, dancers with silver bangles on their ankles. It looked more like a king's court than a brother's house. Ham met them at the gates, arms wide. Welcome, he shouted. You've never seen anything like this, have you? Shem stepped forward. You've built well? Ham grinned. I've built better. That night, the table stretched wider than a river. Fruits, roasted game, honey wine in gold cups. Ham told stories, loud, grand stories. His sons laughed like kings in training, but something in the air felt sharp, like a joke held just under the surface. Brother, Ham said loudly, lifting his cup toward Shem, tell us again how you covered father's shame. The table went quiet. Shem's eyes narrowed. Why? Ham leaned back. Because I think about that day a lot. How you two became the heroes and I became the shadow. Japheth said quietly, no one called you a shadow. Didn't they? Ham snapped. Then with a gesture he clapped. A servant stepped forward with a scroll, old, cracked, and sealed in pitch. I found something, Ham said, his voice cool. Buried in the ruins near the ark. He broke the seal, unrolled the parchment. It was one of Noah's old records. A map, a prophecy. One that showed territories, blessings, and curses divided by blood. You see this? Ham said, jabbing the parchment. This says Canaan's cursed. My son, not me. So what if I rewrite that? Japheth stood slowly. What are you saying? Ham's voice dropped. I've grown stronger than all of you. My people are bigger, our walls higher. If curses are written by men, maybe they can be undone by men too. Shem's eyes narrowed. You're not rewriting history, he said. I'm rewriting my future, Ham replied. Suddenly, horns sounded from the edge of the valley. Not music, alarms. A scout ran in. Raiders, he shouted. From the west, 3 caravans, armed. In the panic, Ham's sons drew weapons. Shem stood between the tents, hands raised. Get the women to safety. Japheth grabbed 2 young boys and ran for the stone pens. It was chaos. But even in the confusion, Ham's voice rang out, sharp and bitter. This wouldn't have happened if I were honored like you. And Shem, bleeding from a cut on his arm, turned and said one sentence. Maybe the greatest curse is needing a throne to prove your worth. That night, the raid ended. The tents were torn, the food gone. But the truth had finally been exposed. Not in war, in character. The valley was quiet the next morning. Fires burned low, tents had been patched, but the feast was over, and the truth was still smoldering beneath the ash. Ham stood on a hill overlooking his ruined courtyard, his fists clenched, his eyes red. His sons stood around him, Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan, each one waiting for orders. But it was Canaan who broke the silence. "What now, Father?" he asked. Ham didn't answer. So Canaan asked again, louder this time. "Are we going to war with them? With Uncle Shem and Japheth?" Ham spun. "Number, not now." "Why not?" Mizraim said. "We're strong." "Because this wasn't about strength," Ham muttered. "It was about respect." Cush rolled his eyes. "That's what you say, but you invited them here. You planned the whole night to prove something." "Enough!" Ham barked. But Canaan didn't speak. He was staring at something behind the tent, an old cloak tucked under a pile of firewood. It was the same cloak Shem and Japheth had used to cover Noah in the vineyard. Somehow it had ended up here, left behind in the panic. Canaan reached for it slowly, and when he held it, something shifted in him. Later that day, while the rest of the household prepared to travel, Canaan made a decision. He saddled a donkey, packed a small satchel, and rode. He found Shem first, camped near the stream with his sons Elam and Arphaxad, building a new altar. Shem looked up, startled. "Canaan?" "I didn't come to fight," Canaan said quickly, holding up the cloak. "I came to return this." Shem took it slowly, eyes narrowing. "And?" he asked. "I came to listen," Canaan added, "not just to words, but to what went wrong." Shem sat down on a log. Canaan stayed standing. "You were a boy when it happened," Shem said, "but you need to know this. It wasn't about a mistake. It was about how your father responded to someone else's." Canaan nodded slowly. "I've seen it," he said. That fire in his voice. That need to prove he's more than what was said. Then quietly, "I don't want to carry that." Japheth arrived just before sundown, walking with a limp from a bruised ankle during the raid. He saw Canaan, froze, then looked to Shem. Shem nodded. He came in peace. Japheth relaxed, just barely. Canaan looked at them both. "I want to start something different," he said. "Not as a shadow, not as a rebellion." He pulled a small scroll from his satchel, blank. "I want to write a new story." Shem exchanged a glance with Japheth. "You can't erase what's been said," Shem said, "but you can walk a different path." "And that path," Japheth added, "starts by honoring what you didn't understand." That night, Canaan stayed by their fire. He didn't talk much, but he listened. And in the morning, when he rode home, he took a different route. Back at Ham's camp, Cush met him at the gate. "Where were you?" Canaan looked at the horizon and said, "Changing course." Canaan didn't say much after returning from Shem and Japheth's camp. He moved slower, worked quieter, watched everything with a new kind of weight in his eyes, like someone who'd seen a map and was still deciding which path to follow. Ham noticed and didn't like it. "You've changed," Ham said one morning as they gathered branches for a new fence. Canaan kept trimming the wood. "People are allowed to grow?" Ham narrowed his eyes. "They're also expected to stay loyal." "To what?" Canaan asked. "To me?" Ham snapped. By evening, the camp was tense. Cush and Mizraim were loud around the fire, boasting about livestock numbers and how far their herds had spread. "We could take the northern ridge if we wanted," Cush said. "It's fertile and empty." "That land belongs to Uncle Shem," Canaan said. Put laughed. "So? We're stronger." Ham didn't speak up. not because he disagreed, but because the silence was easier than the truth. That night, firelight flickered over Canaan's face as he sat apart, staring into the embers. The shadows moved like memories. He remembered Shem's steady voice, Japheth's calm gaze, the weight of the old cloak in his hands. He made a decision. Before dawn, Canaan left. Again. This time, not to visit, but to live differently. He returned to Shem, not as a guest, but as a worker. "I want to build," he said, "the right way." Shem said nothing at first, then quietly, "What about your father?" "I still love him," Canaan replied, "but I won't follow him into bitterness." Back at Ham's camp, Cush burst into the tent. "He's gone," he said. "Canaan left for them." Ham stood up slowly, and for the first time in years, looked tired. "What are we doing, Father?" Cush demanded. "We were supposed to rise. We were supposed to lead." Ham stared at the horizon, long and hard, then said, "Maybe we were supposed to obey." That night, the fire in Ham's camp burned lower than usual, not from lack of wood, but from a quiet reckoning. Because sometimes the worst echo isn't a shout. It's a sun walking away. The wind came first, hot, dry, carrying the smell of dust, leather, and fear. Shem stood near the olive trees when he saw them on the horizon, figures stumbling through the valley, heads low, leading animals that looked half-starved. He called out to Japheth, who was watering his sheep. "Travelers," Shem said, "but not strong ones." As the strangers drew closer, the truth became clear. A small tribe, 3 families, a few tired camels, children wrapped in linen to keep off the sun, and no weapons, only hunger. They stopped at the edge of Shem's land. The leader stepped forward, an old man with cracked lips and a limp. "We come from the east," he said, voice dry as stone. "Famine, bandits. We've lost many. We ask for shelter, even just a field to rest." Shem said nothing right away. He studied their faces, their wounds, their silence, then said, "You may stay, but only if you cause no harm." The man nodded and bowed. "Blessings on your tent," he whispered. Japheth was slower to agree, but when he saw the children collapse from exhaustion, he helped carry them to the stream himself. Word spread quickly. By nightfall, the strangers were camped along the edge of Shem's valley, and the next morning, Ham heard. He arrived before noon riding fast, Cush behind him. "What are you doing?" Ham demanded. Shem looked up from grinding barley, feeding the hungry. "Strangers," Ham hissed. "You don't know their stories. What if they're thieves or spies?" "They're people," Shem replied, "tired ones." Cush leaned forward. "If you let them get comfortable, they'll take advantage. That's how power is lost, by being too kind." Japheth stepped in. "Power isn't lost through kindness. It's lost through fear." Cush scoffed. Ham's jaw tightened. Then he said, "Don't expect our help if they turn on you." And they rode off. That night, a storm swept in from the west. Rain slammed the tents. Wind pulled up stakes. And in the middle of it, one of the strangers' children went missing. Without hesitating, Canaan and Shem sprinted into the rain. They searched for hours. Finally, near the cliffs, they found her, shivering beneath a ledge. Canaan wrapped his cloak around her. Shem carried her home. The next morning, the stranger tribe wept in thanks, and when they spoke again, it wasn't to ask, it was to offer. "We have nothing," the old man said, "but we will serve. Work, stay, if you let us, or go if you must." Shem smiled. "You're already home." Not long after, Shem's fields doubled in strength, not because of magic, but because hearts were united, and where kindness plants roots, strength grows. The strangers, now guests, were already helping build new shelter, tending animals, planting seeds. Laughter rang through the hills like it hadn't since before the flood. But across the ridge in Ham's camp, silence, tension, and then a loud crash. Cush had smashed a clay water jar outside the tent. Again. "This is a mistake," he muttered, pacing. "They're growing. Too fast. Too many people. Too much land." Mizraim agreed. "They'll outnumber us before winter." But it was Canaan, quiet, watching, who finally said, "Maybe that's not a bad thing." Ham turned sharply. "You think it's wise to let outsiders spread across the land God gave us?" Canaan didn't flinch. "It's not about us. It's about what's right." "Right?" Cush scoffed. "Shem humiliated our father, and now you defend him." Canaan stood. "You mean when we left father alone in his shame, and they covered him with honor?" The tent went silent. Ham's face paled. Mizraim stepped back. Even Cush had no words, because suddenly they remembered. The vineyard, the robe, the moment that changed everything. "You never moved on," Canaan said, softer now. "You've been building on bitterness. That's why we're weaker. That's why people leave." He looked around the tent, at Mizraim, at Cush, at the maps on the floor and the weapons against the wall. "Maybe the real enemy isn't out there." He pointed toward Shem's valley. "Maybe it's in here." Ham clenched his fists. For a moment, everyone expected shouting, or worse, but instead, Ham sat down, hard. Like the weight of those words finally cracked something inside him. "Leave me," he said. One by one, they obeyed. Only Canaan lingered. "I still honor you," he said gently, "but I won't follow pride anymore." And he walked out, leaving his father in silence. That same afternoon, Canaan returned to Shem's camp. He found Japheth near the stream. "Trouble?" Japheth asked. Canaan gave a crooked smile. "You could say that." "You're welcome here," Japheth said. "I know," Canaan replied. "That's why I came back." What they didn't know was that Cush had followed him, quiet as a fox through the trees. And now Cush had seen it all. Canaan's return, Japheth's welcome. And in his chest, a new fire ignited, but not humility, revenge. Cush moved like smoke through the trees, silent, intent. His face was unreadable, but his hands gripped a torch wrapped in pitch-soaked cloth. Behind him, 2 of his men followed, loyal, angry, and ready to do whatever he asked without question. "Just scare them," Cush had told them. "No blood, just smoke, just fear." But under his breath, as they reached the far fields of Shem's camp, he whispered something else. "They shouldn't have taken my brother." It began just before sunset. A sudden flicker on the hillside. Then a line of flame danced through the wheat. Canaan was the first to see it. "No, no, not here," he breathed. He ran toward the smoke as shouts rose through the valley. Japheth saw the glow and sounded a ram's horn. Shem came from the tents with a shovel and water skins. "Get the oxen," someone shouted. "Line the buckets. Protect the children." But the fire moved fast, too fast. And Canaan, sprinting ahead of the others, spotted the flicker of shadows at the tree line, not sparks, people. He dove through the grass, rolled down a slope, and came face to face with one of Cush's men, torch in hand, startled. "Canaan?" Canaan didn't wait. He tackled him, wrestled the torch away, and shouted, "You don't belong here!" The man stumbled back, hesitated, then ran. Canaan looked up the ridge, and there was Cush, standing still, watching, not running, just staring, their eyes locked. For the first time in years, Canaan saw his brother not as loud or bold, but hollow, empty. Cush turned and disappeared into the trees. By midnight, the fire was out, smoke hung low. The outer fields were gone, but no lives lost, and no one could explain the cause, except Canaan. He walked into Shem's main tent. The elders were gathered. His face was streaked with ash, his tunic torn. "I know who did this," he said. They looked at him, waiting. It was Cush. No gasps, no shouts, just silence. Shem stepped forward. "We feared as much." Canaan clenched his jaw. "He was my brother, but I won't cover it." Japheth put a hand on his shoulder. "You just did more than most ever could," he said. "You chose the truth." That night, Canaan stood at the edge of camp, looking out toward the hills. He thought of his father, his brothers, and what might have happened if he had stayed silent, but he didn't. Because protecting the weak isn't just about lifting burdens. Sometimes it's about standing between them and the ones you love most. Cush didn't return to camp until just before sunrise. He expected silence. Instead, he found Ham waiting, alone, no guards, no brothers. Just his father sitting on a flat stone, staring at the ashes of the fire pit. Ham didn't look up as Cush approached. He just said, "I know what you did." Cush stopped mid-step. "Then you know why," he said coldly. "I know enough," Ham replied. Finally, he raised his eyes. "You set a fire that could have killed children." Cush folded his arms. "They took Canaan from us. From me." "No," Ham said quietly. "You drove him away." Cush flinched, but only for a moment. "They humiliated us, Father. You've spent your whole life trying to make up for one mistake, and they act like they're the only ones who matter." Ham stood slowly. "I spent my life trying to undo a curse, but I forgot something." "What's that?" "That curses don't lift when you fight fire with fire. They lift when someone, anyone, chooses humility." For the first time in years, Ham's voice shook. "Canaan did what I couldn't. He let go, he forgave, and he walked toward peace while we were still sharpening stones." Cush looked away, jaw locked. "You're weak," he said. Ham nodded. "Maybe. But I'd rather be weak with honor than strong with shame." Then he stepped back. "I won't protect you from what comes next." "What does that mean?" "It means if Shem comes, if Japheth calls for justice, I won't stop them. You're my father, and I taught you wrong." For the first time, Cush had no words, and for the first time, Ham turned his back. Back in Shem's camp, the mood was tense but calm. Canaan sat with the elders, head bowed. "I don't want revenge," he said, "only to stop the cycle." Shem nodded. "Then that's exactly what we'll do." Instead of retaliation, they sent a message. "Let the fire end here. Let no blood follow the smoke. But let every heart take responsibility for the path it chooses." Canaan carried it himself, straight to Ham's camp, placed it in his father's hand, and waited. Ham read it slowly, then looked up at his son. "I don't deserve this mercy." "No," Canaan said softly, "but neither did I." That night, no horns sounded, no warriors rode, and for the first time in decades, there was peace between the tents. The olive trees were older now, taller, their roots deeper, and beneath their branches 3 tents stood side by side. No banners, no weapons, just a table and 3 brothers. Shem, hands weathered from scroll work and farming, sat quietly sipping water. Japheth, sun-worn and smiling faintly, leaned back and watched the wind move through the fields. And Ham, a little slower, a little grayer, eyes softer than they'd once been, sat beside them. No pride, no boasting, only presence. They hadn't gathered like this in years, not since the ark had settled, not since the vineyard, not since everything broke and then somehow healed. Shem placed a stone on the table, smooth, white, inscribed with one word, remember. "It's what Father always said," Shem spoke, "after the flood, before the altar." Japheth nodded. "He said remembering keeps us humble. Forgetting makes us dangerous." Ham traced the letters with one finger. "It's hard to remember when all you want is to forget who you used to be." Shem looked at him. "Then remember who you chose to become." There was silence after that. Not awkward, not strained, just full. Like the silence that follows a storm, when the rainbow hasn't come yet, but you know it will. Canaan arrived with firewood, Mizraim brought figs and bread, Cush didn't come. He had moved east, quietly, not in exile, just in distance, still healing. And the others let him go. Later that evening, Shem took a scroll from his pouch. He read slowly, carefully, by the firelight. "Blessed be the Lord who remembers the faithful and gives mercy to the humble. From generation to generation, his truth will not fail." Japheth closed his eyes. Ham breathed deeply. And for a moment, they weren't sons of a survivor. They were men who had learned to live in a world rebuilt from grace. The next morning, before parting, they each placed a stone at the edge of the olive grove, not to mark territory, not to claim ownership, but to honor what had been forgiven, what had been learned, and what they hoped would live on long after they were gone. 3 brothers, 3 choices, 1 legacy. Because how you respond to weakness can build a world no flood can wash away.